All right, so we're going to talk about character development today. We will first talk about general feedback on assignment 3 from session 3, as we always do. Then we will talk about why character development is important. Why do we even have to do it? You have a story, why do you need to do character development? Then we will talk about that character development is not something that you do in the beginning when you're introducing a character, but it happens across the plot. Then we'll talk about types of characters, and we're going to talk about some main types of characters that you generally see in novels and movies. We're not going to talk about 50, 60 types of characters, probably 5, 6 main types of characters. Then we will focus on profiling our characters. So what does that mean is how you think about a character in your writing, in your book, and how you make sure you stay true to that type of character. Then we'll talk about a technique to accomplish that, which is interviewing your characters. And then we will talk about another technique. How will your character react to some of the what if scenarios? Then we'll look at home assignment 4, and then we will present a character profile template to you where you can see how you can utilize the template for your homework. All right. So feedback on assignment 3. First of all, like I always said, all of you demonstrated good understanding of the concepts. It is very clear that you understand fundamental parts of a story and you understand how they flow together, right? So that again came out very clearly as part of this assignment. Now, some constructive feedback. Some plots were very hard to understand. And I have doubled down on this particular point in the past a lot. You have to really make sure it's not you envisioning as reader, but you're envisioning your reader as somebody else who doesn't know anything about your story, right? So while you're writing the story, you know a few things in your mind that you might feel like you have expressed, but you have not. So try to get into your reader's shoes and figure out if you really have shared what you imagine you have shared with the reader, right? Because you spend maybe months, years, days on your story. It's very real for you, but it may not be real for the reader unless you make it, right? So that is my first and foremost feedback here, that number of plots, if you just read them as a new reader, you don't understand what's going on. So that is something that you should always remember. And it's not only about plot, it's about your book, your story, or movie you make. Never make assumptions. Get in the shoes of a reader who doesn't know anything yet. And take a look at your story. Very important. Many events were not real, right? So the most fundamental part of writing is how you really convincing your reader. Because if you're not convincing your reader, then your reader is not going to read your book or your story to the end. Your reader is likely to leave at midway, right? Maybe, your first page engages reader really well, but then momentum is not carried forward in the same way. So it is very important to make these events real. And what I mean by them is, and I'm going to exaggerate a little bit, but you will get the point, right? So a character kills somebody just because that person did not share a cookie with the character. Can you ever think that's real? Can you ever think reader reading this will not drop your book, right? Now this is exaggerated, but you think about this. A lot of events that I came across were not very far away from this, right? And the reason was because you want something to happen in your story. and you choose a relatively easy path, right? But that's where you lose your readers. You need to convince your readers. You do 5 murders, you do it totally fine. But how different is one murder from the next one? Why is it even needed, right? So unless you make that real and convincing for the reader, it is going to be a very tough sell. All right. Lastly, some stories are missing uniqueness, right? A portal opens, somebody gets in the portal, comes out winning. It's a formula, right? So you need to put your unique touch in this story. You need to give reader something to remember, right? When they read your story, it shouldn't be that experience. Even if they finish, it shouldn't be that now they're done with it. And tomorrow or day after, a month later or a week later, they will never remember they read a story like this. That is not being successful. Being successful is when your reader remembers this story, right? May not be like 3 years, 5 years from now, but at least for a month. That, hey, I read something which was a little bit unique, little bit different. All right. So I will take questions because it was complex undertaking. It was tough, challenging for each one of you. So if anybody has any questions based on this feedback or based on your struggle or challenges that you faced doing assignment 3, you can unmute now and ask your question.
Sorry, I have a question. So this is kind of related to assignment 3. I'm just wondering how we can talk to you personally about our individual stories and maybe perhaps feedback you suggested on how to proceed exactly. Is there a way to talk to you directly?
So write your question in WhatsApp, but have your work in the assignment so that I can take a look where you are. So you might say, hey, I'm at this paragraph 3 and I don't know whether I should reveal it at this point, right? So that would be your question. And then I can go and look in your assignment, what is your paragraph 3?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right. So why is character development important? So just take a minute and think about what are some of the best movies you've watched or best books you've read, and why did you remember them? Just try to imagine. Let it flash in your memory for next 1 minute. Think about it. Think about what you see when you really imagine those masterpieces. Something that you thoroughly enjoyed. All right. So when you imagine something that you really liked, whether it is a movie or a novel, you're more likely going to remember the main characters and the situations that they got themselves into, and then how they dealt with those situations, right? What does that tell you? That character development is most foundational to any story, because that's the thing that you remember. That's the thing that makes you interested, right? So readers need to get invested in the characters, their lives, and journey in the book. So you have to really bring characters to the life or create characters which are very well-rounded, complex, and lifelike. Why lifelike? Because you want your readers to identify with them. Right? If they don't identify with them, if they don't understand why the characters are behaving the way they are behaving, then you're not successful. All right? Now, the main characters should stand out. They should be memorable. Right? So there are plenty of characters in the creation that you're working on. Just think about main characters at least. They should stand out. You should always remember them. You want your readers to remember them, right? So how do you do that is what we are going to cover in next slides. There must be a reason for every supporting character to be in the story. So there shouldn't be anyone in the story who is not supposed to be there. There shouldn't be any filler characters. There has to be a purpose for every character in your story who shows up in your story. Distinct voices. So your characters should have distinct voices, right? So, for example, a character of yours may be having a southern accent, right? A character of yours may have certain fillers, certain words that he or she says every time. A character should be saying everything in form of a question, right? You know, representing people around you. If you look at people around you, different people have different styles when they speak, right? So make sure you implement that, because otherwise what ends up happening is when a reader is reading a book, all the reader really sees is narrator talking for these characters, which is you talking on behalf of every character. You don't want that. You want yourself out of the picture. You want your characters to speak, right? And that really makes them lifelike. That really makes them complex, right? Diversity. And I've listed a few examples here. Diversity is a very wide topic, but you have to have diversity in your characters. Many a times we are so super focused on the events that we forget about the real scenarios. In reality, how your characters are. They're from diverse backgrounds. You go to school, you interact with somebody at your game or somewhere else. You go shopping, plenty of diverse characters. And any undertaking you do in life, you come across diverse characters, right? Some may have health conditions. There might be varied degree of intelligence, smartness. They may be coming from different geographies. They may be belonging to different genders, races, colors, right? So it's very important. And one thing that I would say here is that writers have to find a very subtle way of bringing in this diversity, right? So it shouldn't be seeming like pushy, that you're pushing it hard. It should be natural. So that's something that is an art that you will learn over your journey as being a writer. So this picture, most of you are very familiar with. And I think all of you understand it really well based on your assignments. I've taken this picture and I've stuck a few stickies here in blue, light blue color, which is basically showing that when you talk about character development, it is not really about talking about character when you first introduce him or her. It's not like, okay, here is my character in the beginning, here is how he or she looks, here is what he or she does, right? Very often, here are some of the good habits, bad habits. All of that becomes apparent over the entire plot line. And I have taken a small journey here from character's perspective over the plot or across the plot of the novel or story. So as you can see, first, character's life changes forever. So something happens. It's a very typical in a story. Many stories start where character's life changes forever because of something happening, right? Next phase is character faces a weakness. So while crisis is building, we show different weaknesses or strengths for a character. And characters makes a major change, right? So this is before climax hits, the character decides to do something, which is a big change or something big, right? And then lastly, I've listed character faces a setback, but comes out at the top, right? So there may be setbacks, there may be defeats, there may be struggle, there may be self journey that character goes through. But in the end, in many books, movies, the character wins in the end, right? So, like I've said earlier, there are no set rules for writing that are always true. Here is a good representation of what frequently happens for a journey for a character in a book or a movie. So this is just to give you an idea that a character development or development of a character happens across the entire plot line. You don't have to stuff everything right in there in the first chapter, because then it is forceful, it is pushy, but you want to give enough at every step, and a large dose probably in the beginning, but wherever it is appropriate, you need to show it, right? And by the end of the story or book or movie, the reader or viewer will have full understanding of the character. All right. So that brings us to the types of characters. Now, there are probably, if you have read or if you research, you will find different types of characters, sometimes 50, 40, 30, 10. I find these six are primarily the common ones. And these are like, I would say, Uber categories. So these are top categories. And each of these categories can be further divided in more types. If you understand these six well, I think you're good for the purpose of this course. So first one is protagonist. Now, many people, when they think about protagonists, they think about heroes, right? That's how mostly it is. But that is not what it means. A protagonist simply is the main character of the story. A protagonist is what a reader is rooting for in the movie or in the book, right? In other words, a protagonist has sympathy and support of the audience, right? That is it. They're generally good, like I said, they're generally heroes, but not always. Sometimes they are dishonest, criminal, they're actually villains, right? And I've taken two examples here. So Harry Potter is a good protagonist, while Joker is the latest Hollywood movie. If you see Joker, he's a protagonist, but he's super bad, right? At least what he turns into, right? So, and I'm not sure if you guys have watched Breaking Bad or Tony Soprano in Sopranos. Those are other examples where protagonist is really a bad guy, not really a hero, has traits which are not traits of a hero. He is more like a villain, but he's a protagonist, right? So just understand that. Now the second one is antagonist. So this is simply a character that opposes or kind of represents obstructions for the protagonist. So antagonist is somebody who is opposite to the protagonist. Now, if protagonist ends up being a villain, then antagonist is likely to be a hero or somebody with positive character. Right? Now, not all stories have antagonists. Most stories have protagonists, but not all stories will have antagonists, because there are stories which do not need antagonists based on the theme, based on what the writer is trying to accomplish, based on the story type, genre, etc. Right? So that's the second kind. And what could be a better example of this than the man whose name should not be said? Right? So the villain in Harry Potter movie. Third kind is love interest, right? Is protagonist object of desire. And when we say love interest, typically it's a lover, but necessarily doesn't have to be. It could be any object of desire. It could be a pet, it could be a family member, anything, right? And a very effective literary device. So we talked about literary devices earlier. I think it was in session 2, if I remember correctly. Love interest is a very effective literary device that authors often use to create situations for protagonists, situations where the protagonist is helpless, tries to do everything for the love interest. The love interest is in danger or in some sort of situation. Often protagonists can also get into moral debate about whether I should save my love interest or should I do something that is right, ethical, right? So just know that it's a very effective literary device in almost controlling protagonist's actions and getting him or her into ethical debate at times, right? And you can achieve a lot there. Now, the fourth one is confidant. So this usually is the best friend or sidekick of the protagonist. So like in Harry Potter, Hermione is a confidant. And this is a very important character type as well, because through this, authors often reveal a lot of character of the protagonist, right? And author is able to provide support, a lot of support, ongoing support, right? So whenever the main character, a protagonist, is in difficult situation, confidants come for their rescue a lot of times, and then providing them mental support as well, right, whenever needed. And then you can use them in many other ways, sometimes create tension between them while there's a bigger tension going, right? That's another effective device in introducing some events. Now, there are tertiary characters, which are the ones who are just hanging around in your story, have a dialogue or two. You know, they are important in the sense that they kind of help paint the background for the story, paint the situations for the story, but they're not the main characters, or they're not the other kinds we have talked about here. And an example would be Padma and Parvati in Harry Potter series, right? The last one I want to talk about is foil. So these are the characters who contrast with the protagonist. And that way, they help highlight the qualities of the protagonist. a good example would be Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. They're they're so different that they bring or underline the different part of each other's personalities. All right. So character profiling is all about analyzing the characters. And like I said earlier, the character development happens across the plot line, right? So as a writer, you would put it across the plot line. And as a reader, he or she is going to discover it across the plot line. But as a writer, you have to sketch it as much as you can in the beginning and then continue updating it as you go on. Because remember what we said earlier in this course. Let the characters fly where they want to fly. Empower your characters. So while you can sketch your characters in the beginning, they might want to do something else that you never thought about. So the sketch will change as you go on developing your story, but try to do your best in the beginning to profile your character, at least the main characters, because that is going to be acting as a rule, ground rule of what you do with that character and what you don't do. Because if you don't do this, the sphere of the rules will be missing and your character will not be consistent. So if you do this right in the beginning and keep it updated as you go on, as things change about that character that you never thought earlier, that is always at any given point of time will be your Bible for that character, right? If you intentionally want a character to be inconsistent in the behavior, that's a totally different story, right? You will document that as part of character profile right in the beginning, right? But character should be consistent in how he or she behaves, how he or she demonstrates traits, characteristics, habits, all of that. So with that, here are a few important things that you need to think about when you profile a character. Motive, and I have the word realistic in parentheses here. Realistic motive. What does your character want in the story you are writing? Very important. Like I said earlier, I still see stories where person A has to kill person B to move the story, and the writer hasn't got a better idea than saying, oh, person B did not give person A cookie, that's why person A killed person B. Nobody will believe it. That's what we mean. Realistic motive. Anything that happens in your story, the readers have to believe your motive that you give to that character. So if a character is doing something, that has to have a very highly justified motive, right? Why would a character feel this way? No, nobody would kill other person for not sharing a cookie, right? Strengths, weaknesses. What are some of the strengths and weaknesses of your character? So you think about your story. You think about how you're thinking about your character. Putting strengths and weaknesses will help you in terms of when there are situations that arise in your story. it will help you paint that mental picture of how the character is going to behave. Otherwise, it's going to be superficial. It won't be real. So list down all these strengths and weaknesses, right? Is she honest or dishonest? Is she blunt? Is she logical, decisive, impulsive, aimless, focused? These are some of the ideas. At the end of this deck, I have references where you guys can go and see some of this stuff. Like the things like, 350 strengths and weaknesses, 100 habits and things like that. Just go through them and you will get more ideas there. Odd habits. Time and time again, you see masterpieces with characters who are brilliant, intelligent, have superpowers or whatever, but they have something odd about them, one or two things that go really well with their character, right? I have listed few here. So your character may be biting nails, always chewing gum, or may walk extremely slowly to the point where he or she may be irritating others, or may leave half sentences, may start saying something and just drop without completing sentence. We all have seen people like them. So think about what are some of the odd habits that your characters may have. Now, again, as we go through this, putting this profiling together for your main characters at least is important, but it doesn't mean that you will have to really stuff everything in your story, right? It's almost like you have now this master database of 1,000 things, maybe 200, maybe 20, and it gives you a very good image of your character as a writer. So that's the first primary use of doing this. You necessarily don't have to use all of this or even some of this, but it makes you feel your character, right? So before you go convince somebody about something, you need to understand that thing yourself. So if you're talking to somebody about Newton's first law, for example, and if you yourself don't know it, you will not be able to convince that person. It's the same thing. If you're really selling your characters to readers, which is what you're doing while having them read your stories, if you have not done this, even if you have not understood your characters yourself, you're not going to be successful. So this is what it does, right? So doing character profiling really gives you a broad understanding and deep understanding and insights into your characters so that you can do a better job in developing them throughout your story, right? So back to this, and major flaws. What are some of the major flaws your characters have? At times, mostly I think writers go with one or two. So being alcoholic, flirty, gullible, hypocritical, illiterate, these are some of the example flaws that your characters might have. All right. Unique features. Now, you may recall Harry Potter's face. And if anybody says, hey, close your eyes and imagine Harry Potter, I bet those of you who have seen movies can really see Harry Potter very clear in your imagination. So what's behind that? What makes it possible is unique features. So it is not as much important probably for short story because you don't get that much of real space to develop detailed view of your characters, features, habits, all of that. But from a writer's perspective, even if you're writing a short story, it's not a bad idea to think about how your characters look and how they're different visually. from normal people that you see day in, day out, right? So think about Harry Potter. His glasses, for example, play a vital role, but then there are other things as well. So think about that. When you think about your characters, think about how they look. Think about their unique features. Think about how people are going to remember them. So this is more about visual appeal than anything else. Next is personality traits. What are some of their personality traits, right? So we talked about habits, strengths, weaknesses, flaws. It may seem like it's a similar thing. It is actually, but it is a bit different. So personality traits are more overarching, right? So their openness. Are they always open for ideas? Agreeableness, grit, curiosity. Are they serious about every small issue? Are they making big fuss about every small issue? Or are they diffusing tense situations by cracking jokes, making everybody at ease, making everybody feel at ease? So these are some of the personality traits, right? So think about them. Next is history or backstory. So a lot of us, I think humans really get things hardwired in them as part of their experiences. Right? So a lot of habits, a lot of behavior that humans have, individuals have, are influenced by how their past has been. So what are the situations they have encountered in the past? What kind of life they have lived? What kind of country they have lived in? What kind of situations they have encountered? So all of that shapes our behavior as individuals. And some of these things stand out because they really are behind what we really want in some cases, right? So a villain who does bad things might have a backstory which was so impactful that it led him or her to become a villain, right? Or somebody might want to spend a lonely life. There might be a backstory why this person turned that way, right? So think about that. And this is also a very good literary device that authors use, right? To kind of make readers believe what authors want to say. So sometimes it might be very extreme that what you're describing, and readers will be in disbelief. This doesn't happen. This can't happen with anyone. But then, in a very good way, or in a very smooth way, without making it feel like you're forcing it, you introduce a backstory, a history, that makes it more believable for the reader. Lastly, what annoys him or her, right? And this is again a very good literary device. You can have characters around this character who have some of those habits. And like I said, you can't kill anybody for not sharing cookies. But look at this. You might have something very annoying, which gives rise to unpredictable events, right? So it may not be because this person did not share cookie, but if you have to kill that character, you can find 100 different ways to kill him or her, right? By creating situations. Right? Somebody gets very annoyed, stands up and runs without watching and falls in a well, right? Think about that. So here is one technique that you should implement. So we talked about these characteristics when we profile characters, right? Or these things that help you visualize your character deeply, right? Now, this is you thinking still, right? How do you make sure you get a very deeper level understanding of your character? That's by interviewing your main characters. So think about your main character sitting next to you. And I've just captured 5 questions here, but authors generally have list of 20, 40, 50, 100 questions that they ask their characters, right? And they get in characters' shoes and answer these questions. And it's not as simple as just answer them. They do a lot of research in answering these questions. So answering these questions may take years at times, right? So get in the habit of interviewing your main character, because that will make it real. Otherwise, what's going to end up happening is you will do character profiling, but it stays shallow, right? So it's more of a paper exercise, but it never penetrates deep down the psychology of your main character. So interview the main character, and you will discover a lot while doing this yourself about your character. Right? Who are you? It's a very philosophical question. So when they describe themselves, they might have a totally different view of themselves as you or reader would see them as. So villain might see himself or herself as a hero, or vice versa. A hero may be saying that, oh, I was saving somebody. In my effort of saving that person, I end up killing 3 people, and there cannot be more horrible person on this earth than me, right? So you need to get into your character's mind. Who are you is a question which will have them answer what they think they are, and it will reveal number of biases, personal biases that they have about them, right? And this is the kind of stuff that makes your characters real. So second question is, what do you want? Right? So you need to ask this question and research this question a lot. And I will tell you this, some of the plots that I read, it was not clear what the main character really wants. Because the writer thinks, murdering few people will be good, will be, it will make readers interested in the story. But if there is motive missing, if there is direction missing, why would anybody want to know about murders, right? So you need to ask your character, what do you really want? There has to be an end goal, right? If you think about the man who should not be named in Harry Potter movie, there were 2 reasons that villain wanted what he wanted. One was Harry Potter was the only one who could really defeat him. Second was he wanted to rule the world of magic. Simple, right? So series may go in so many books and things, but what the character wanted was very simple. So you need to simplify it. You need to really challenge yourself to find from your character what your character really wants, right? And then more importantly, why do you want it? So given that you want to kill this person, but why would you want to kill this person? What are you achieving? What's the real reason behind? And if when you ask this question, it will give you so many additional insights that you can use to uncover more conflicts, right? because this is really important. Why do you want it is where convincing your readers really lies. If you don't make it apparent on the readers, you will not impress them. How do you plan to get it? So, okay, this is what you want. This is who you are. This is what you want. This is why you want it. How do you plan to get it? So you want to be king of this kingdom. Do you have any idea how to get there? Now, this is important again. Like I said, number of plots I read. A character A wanted something from character B. The writer focused on just what character A wants and got it. Means were not important. That doesn't sell. That doesn't convince your real readers. It is very important. How do you plan to get it? And that plan has to be very real, reasonable, understandable, convincible, right? Else your readers are going to go away. So just don't connect with unreasonable events. Connect with reasonable, real events. And that goes back to how do you plan to get it? Because the plan has to be realistic in the world where the character is. So in a normal world, something may be difficult and you want to do it, then you have to go to imaginary world. You have to think about magic realism. You have to think about fantasy novels or fantasy genre, but you have to pay attention here. And then what are you afraid of? Right? So if you ask this question, they will reveal a lot about how they will respond in the face of a crisis. Right? And also, you might create situations that make your character nervous, and you may achieve things. Right? So like I said, writers are always trying to achieve things, but writers needs to find reasonable ways, realistic ways to achieve them. And these are some of the tools to do that. If you ask your character, what are you afraid of? Your character reveals few things and you register them and then use later on in achieving what you want to achieve. All right. So second technique is, how will your character react if, here are some what if situations. I'm not going to detail them out. We are, at time almost here, but think about these situations and they will reveal even more about your character and how they will behave. It's a good exercise to do along with your character profiling. So someone makes fun of them. How will your character react if someone makes fun of them, someone makes fun of someone else in front of them, someone bitches about mutual fund who's not there, someone does something inappropriate, their plan is failing, they made some plan, now it's failing. Do they really get cranky? Do they really show grit? Do they really show that they can really still think and plan? Or do they have a plan B, right? So all of that is important. What if they're winning? How do they behave when they're winning? When they're losing? When their life is in danger? When they're trapped or injured, right? So think about a lot of these what if scenarios and how your characters will behave. So that brings us to homework. So choose two main characters from your story. Complete the character profile for each of these two characters. To make them whole, think of them in full context. So your story may be a tiny piece of their existence. When you develop your character profile, you just don't constrain yourself to the story. You look at them as humans, as real people in the larger context of life. When you develop a story, you can pick the parts of the profile that are important, right? So when you develop the character profile here, you don't have to use everything. It's just to give you a mental picture, a very clear picture of your characters, right? It makes you friends with your characters. You know them really well. That's the whole purpose of doing it. But once you're done doing this, you can feel free to see what parts are relevant to use in your stories, right? So, for example, you don't have to make every character have odd habit. You don't have to have every character in your short story have a weakness or flaw, right? But whatever works for you after you do this profiling is all up to you. So here is the template that I'm going to put in the Word document for you guys. So describe name of the character. So what's the name of your character? Type of the character. So choose one of these. What does the character want in your story? So what is that he or she is trying to achieve? What is the motive? Why does she or he or she wants that? So why does she want or he want what he wants? How exactly he or she is planning to get it? We talked about that. What is he or she afraid of? What are some of his or her features? Anything that makes him or her unique? One major flaw your character has, one odd habit that he or she has. What are two personality traits he or she has that are very important to the story? So write like 3, 4 sentences on each max, right? That's your assignment for. I'll be putting the template out there, Word template, and just copy that template and then rename it under your name and then complete the assignment. So last assignment, what some of you did, a couple of you actually did, you copied other students' work, right? And then it created a confusion because you didn't update it, right? So same story, same plot in two different files. I saw that. So just copy the template that I upload, not the ones from other students. Just make sure. And my template doesn't have any name. It just says probably, assignment 4 template. And lastly, here are some references that I have included. You can go, look at different questionnaires for your characters. There are 350 character traits on this link, odd habits, strengths and weaknesses, and then write about yourself. So this is a very good example you can leverage as well. So that brings us to the end of this session. I will open it up for questions right now. I also know that we are at time. So maybe you can stick around for 5 more minutes. For those of you who cannot, feel free to drop. But for those of you who have questions, now is the time.
Hi, sorry, I have a question. Sorry, I have 2 questions actually.
Go ahead.
So my first one is what if we only have one main character in our story? The rest of the characters don't really, they're more there to get the storyline across, but they don't really matter as much.
So that's fine. If you want to develop just one character, that's totally fine. And I remember your story. So totally good. I would say try to think, so not to this level, but who's the next character who appears more than anybody else besides your main character. So you may want to pick that one and develop a little bit, if not totally. So decide yourself what's the level of definition you want to have for second character. May not be this, this much in depth like you do it for main character, but I would encourage do second character, whoever you think is the second one who features in the story more than anybody else besides main character.
Okay, sorry, and then I just have one more question. What if the why the main character does something is the same thing as what he is afraid of?
Our protagonist does something, and the reason for that something is his fear.
Yes.
That's totally valid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that my part, you will make it feature in some way. And I think it's very relevant question for your story, because you're embarking on something which is not easily convincible. Like, you will have to spend time, and you need to find ways to convince your reader. It's totally good, but it totally depends on how you're pacing your story. So I think as you develop, you will feel whether you need or you don't need explanation, is where I'm getting.
Okay.
So keep it in mind. You might not need it the way you're pacing your story, right? Because in your story itself, you might make it a very trifle point to kind of justify why this has to happen, right? So backstory becomes irrelevant. In another take at that story, it may be very important, right? So it all depends on how you're pacing your story.
Okay, sorry, just one last question on this topic, but more general. Right, sorry, I just forgot. Could we make the main character, could someone make the main character not be able to justify his or her actions to himself? Like, could that be part of the plot, that maybe the main character is also trying to justify their own actions, but they can't find a reason?
So, first of all, I don't think characters justify reasons. So let me phrase it this way. I don't think character's justification is same as justification to the reader, right? So character may or may not justify what he or she is doing, and there may be a reason for that, right? So some characters may not have mental stability to make sense of things, is an example, just an example, right?
Mm.
Reader knows that. Reader knows that this character is all over the place, right? Is very fluid in thinking, is not able to articulate, is not able to even understand or organize his or her own thoughts, what to expect from this character, right? So that's one extreme. But what I'm trying to say here is that you're convincing the reader, and convincing the reader is beyond a character, right? So there may be more that reader knows about character, and it goes back to what I said. When you interview your character, you know all the biases. So reader will know, hey, this character is no good, totally all over the place, contradicts, every sentence, next sentence he or she says contradicts the previous one, right? But character may not think that. So as long as your reader is convinced that, hey, this is why this is realistic, you're good. The character doesn't have to.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bevin.
Yeah.
So I have a question. How would you like address a character's like unique physical descriptions, like you gave the example of Harry Potter's glasses? Like, how would you address it in the story if it's first person? And, like, not to make it too obvious to the reader, but like to make it kind of relevant.
So that's a great question. So all the visual appearances, you would address them right when you introduce the character, right? And some of them might be, when you think it's a lot, you might have opportunity when your character is meeting somebody, and that other characters may you may use that character's thinking in describing some of the remaining features, right? But generally, it's right in the beginning. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
And I'll probably send, we are running out of time. I'll probably send out some good reading material on describing the features, the visual part of the characters.
Yeah.
What other questions you guys have for me?
I had two quick questions. First, how can we make sure we're being respectful if we try to add diversity into our stories?
Everything is possible in fiction, right? you might as well have a character who is disrespectful. So as long as a narrator, you're not disrespecting anybody, a culture, a specific, putting specific class or segment or whatever on spot, or criticizing them, you could, you might have a character who might have full disrespect for a culture, a kind of class or whatever. That's totally fine.
Okay. And the second question is, when we're doing our profiling, my character doesn't really get a desire or doesn't have anything they want until midway through the story. So should we do the profiling like at the character at the beginning of the story or after the story ends, or?
So you should still do it in the beginning, because it doesn't matter. So you as a writer, you're going to start on this journey, and you need to set your rules right now about this character, right? So whether it happens in midway or after that, just set it right now. What you might want to include is that this character seems like maybe a character who doesn't know what he wants until, like you say, hey, this character is not very focused, right? And discovers what he wants or whatever. But it's always great to do your best at any given point of time. So do your best right now at the beginning, and then keep it updated as you go on, as you discover more about the character.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right, thank you all for your time. And again, like always, the assignment should be there in next few hours. The template should be there, due by end of Wednesday, like always. And it may be few hours today because I have to go out for something and come back, and I'll upload it after that. But it should be available, let's say, in next 5 hours. Talk to you again.
Thank you.
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 Thank you. Bye.